Okay, so yeah, basically the green zone and red zone can be a confluence in many different ways. So like when I see that there's a 188 200 that insinuates that the green zone should work, like in this case it was outside of the range, but I'm like, well, if I go back, like I don't know, right? I don't know what the highs or whatever are going to look like, but I'm like, is this the average spike that we've used on the other side of the spectrum at some other point? Or was it something respectable? It wasn't the largest one, but we've definitely made spikes like that before, and it leads me to believe that that's an appropriate size spike for this range, and that gives me added confluence as well, because there's been other environments where they've been really the best places to trade the outside of the range. Sometimes it's outside of the top of the red zone. Sometimes it's outside of the bottom of the green, and we can use that as confluence because let's say, for instance, your 188 200 is in the green zone, and the B point's only in the middle of the range. Well, if there's a red zone that's all the way on the other side of the range, that trade can actually be bigger than the harmonic pattern altogether. You can take it through the B point and through, because you don't want to cut your whole position usually right in the middle of the range. If you've acquired it from an extreme, you typically deserve to get the other side of the range, and you can manage it to the other side. But it also looks like the pattern of the morning was a giant inverse head and shoulders. Played out really well. Yeah, I can see very clearly that this is the move that they were going to do in the morning, and it already got going right off the open, just like that other day. Do you remember the other day? Oh my goodness. It's the same thing. Hold on. I'm going to show you guys something. Do you remember this day? Okay. Everybody remembers, I hope, the 9:30. This is 9:30, you can see, right? Monday, 9:30. Look at how we started that day, eh? Like, it was like a giant, oh shit. It was like a giant inverse head and shoulders in a weird way, that tried to play out. The right shoulder was lower than the left. And also, but the one thing that really stood out to me is this like chop that we came from, this like really bad chop, and it started to blast. And when I look at what we're doing right now, I see it's not exactly the same, like, because it's angled, but this sort of, uh, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 launch was still there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then open launch. 9:30 is like a rocket ship, and sure, it came from this. As it came from this, it's got a little bit of an angle. This one didn't, but the same moves required to make this happen have all happened. And I'm just like, geez, do you know that day we ran just like this? We ran for like we paused a little bit right here, just like we did a minute ago, and then we just kept chugging, all the way up to like fucking 10:20 or whatever, and it just went right to the red zone. And today, we're not even asking for half that. Like, think about it. It was all the way down here. It was actually using the green zone. And today, we're asking it to go from here. We're asking it to go from here. It's nothing. So, I see that. And also, like, in the mornings, we've been seeing a ton of ends and everything. Like, I do notice that the two lows that we've made right there have actually started to, we've managed to achieve that price quicker. That's a strange thing. Usually it actually takes longer, and it's like, oh, it basically got there. But no, 9 times out of 10, it actually hits the circle. This time, it's so eager. And I'm like, let me just put that same math on Monday real quick, because like we were eager that day too, where we had this low and we had this low. If I take them over to the highs, like there's no which way, shape, and form that we didn't start sooner than the circle. So that's similar. I like that. That's similar. Also, that blue line played a pretty vital role in the future. Um, So we got one here. So we're at the VWAP. This is what we did on Monday. This is what we're doing now. It's very similar. If I was to drag it over, you can see it's just not on an angle. And then, like, geez, we've got other fibs too. These aren't just the only fibs we could be looking at there. We can be looking at some other big ones here on the left, or, well, they're not as big actually. But the 188 200s are all draped across the red zones, which insinuate that the movement from there could come all the way down to here, and this movement there could come all the way down to here. And I mean, the red zone can simply come to the green zone. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah. The 261s are also up there. So, okay. When I see that, the 261s, okay, they're roughly this distance away from the red zone. You know, like within that distance, we could make a spike. And all it would mean is the 261 comes back down to the red zone. Comes back down to the 188. 261 comes back down to the red zone. Comes back to the 188. We love to go 261 to 188. We love to make spikes that are even on both sides of the range. You know, we could even end up using the range and then deciding to make the spike. It doesn't have to be the first time that we get there that we make this spike, but it could at any time that we get to the red zone make a spike that matches the one on the bottom. And it's that particular. And I'm like, find me one other person in the world that has this range, and we could even talk about, you know, the people making it. But if not, it'll be the institutions doing. Like the institutions definitely have the range, or they wouldn't respect it so much. The VWAP is getting respected right now, or we will see it again. I'm confident. Oof! Look at that beautiful
wow.
movement, right up to the 200, right up to the red zone. We just used the range, ladies and gentlemen.
Geez, that happened quick.
Mm-hmm.
2 hours later.
It totally reminds me of yesterday, where it's like, well, remember when we were at the VWAP and I was like, you know, every movement we do away from the thing, what are the odds we don't come back to it? Even if we're just willing to do a bigger move that we haven't seen in the range before, what are the odds we actually can stay away from that thing? And I'm like, well, hold on. You know, it's supposed to be able to go to the VWAP band. So technically, in theory, there's no move that's smaller than that one that couldn't get back to the VWAP. Like, this is the kind of distance that we had on the one side of the spectrum, and if I take that distance and put it up here, we can see that's that. You know, so I'm like, oh geez, it could actually go all the way up there and still just be bullshit and come back to the VWAP. So I'm like, that's interesting. Like, it reminds me a lot of the setup from yesterday, where, the overnight session. A lot of people don't have this experience because it literally started at the end of the day. Like, it made a 61, and then everyone was like, oh, everybody, you know, take this 61, it's gonna work like the last one, and it just failed. And right now, I can see we're kind of doing the same thing, except it hasn't threatened to make a 61. It made almost the exact same movement, and then we pushed up again, and it didn't pull back. It's kind of went up then sideways, which is bullish. You know, I do think that making this kind of sideways has prevented a lot of short sellers from being able to take profit, and they're stuck. They're literally just stuck, waiting, hoping that it's going to do what they want it to do. And I mean, it's got squeeze written all over it. Like, think about the people that have seen the patterns in here. Like, somebody thought that was a Head and Shoulders. Like, think about how it's treating them. You know, that's tough. You know, it's not like scalpers can't make money on that, but you know, if you took like bought a put, like, or something like you took a stock trade, QQQ hasn't moved enough, you know, for you to take profit. You know what I mean? It's just really not that much movement. So they've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm like, One thing I do really like is coming back from the 261s to the 188s, because those are excuses to smash the red zone from above. So that's one thing I like. And the reason why I also like it is because this average move that we've done in the past would actually be appropriate to make in there. So if we wanted to make a pullback that was similar to that one, doing that up there would actually be pretty attractive. Not particularly the bigger move through the range, but back to the range. And you know what that would be? If we did that movement, right? This movement right here, back down, that would be this distance on the other side of the range. Almost, pretty much. So making things relatively even on both sides, like for whatever spike we had on the bottom, we could make a spike on the top, except it just comes down to the 188-200. It comes back to the red zone. That would make a lot of sense. If we managed to create that specific move above and then come back down. Of course, many other movements could happen along the way back down to the red zone, because we like to get on top of the red zone so we can smash it from above. And if we wanted to do it from the same distance that we did on the bottom, it would make a lot of sense. It's done that a lot in the past, where distances have been made even on both sides of the range. But so far, we have created the movement that was, basically every single time we make a head, this is what it does. So we have to watch out for 3 drives or a head and shoulders, something like that to try and form out of this. Because if you think about, what it would look like in the event that we did come back to the 188, could that be the second drive? Could that be the head? Oh yeah, it could be. It could be weird looking. But if I just simply drag this movement over again, could that be the third drive? Could that be the right shoulder? That's like 3 movements in advance, but you can see how this movement is necessary for both of those patterns, regardless of if we make a shoulder that's here or if we make a 3 drives that's here. By the time that we get to that point, we'll have a lot more data to determine whether or not this is likely or this is likely. We don't have to guess right now. So that's the beauty of it. And it's only because the market has done this so much recently that I even like this. It's not because this is my strategy or that this is what I do, or the fact that I invented this, or even understand that, this is happening. I expect it to change and I encourage it to change. I encourage it to change. Because all the people that want to repeat things mindlessly over and over and over again, expecting the same result, it's just too much. But those that are paid to calculate exactly what's going to happen, the market respects the most. And, anticipating the need to be in because you see why is the only reason to take action. And I'm like, that's the system, like it's like a process where if that process, doesn't start with an understanding, that doesn't lead to an action, that doesn't lead to a profit, you got to look at the information again. You got to look at the, the analysis, you got to look at your mentality, you got to look at whatever the ailment could be that prevents you from applying yourself to the understanding that you have. But until you have the understanding, it's very hard to say that you should begin. And it's like one understanding is not good enough as well. It's strange, but what is good enough? I mean, the more that you know, the merrier. And at the end of the day, at least I would say know all of the patterns that people have used over the past 80 years. And then all the patterns that we like to use in 2025, all the patterns that we like to use since Robinhood came out, the patterns that contradict the ones of the past. Sometimes the ones of the past work, but most of the time they fail now. So, at the end of the day, it's really important to understand that a lot of those patterns that fail now love to form perfectly, so that they get people involved with their failure. Some of the clearest bullish patterns have been actually old bearish ones, like head and shoulders. Like perfect example, is the one that we had to start off this consolidation. You can see how somebody could get trapped immediately in a head and shoulders, and they were never let off with profit. They were squeezed. They didn't get off enough of QQQ. If they bought puts in there, they didn't get enough profit, and at the end of the day, this happened to them. And it's not uncommon for that to be the case. Some of the ones that we've seen fuel the trends as well, like major large head and shoulders that just instantly go wrong and never have any salvation, like the day ends on the failure of their pattern. Yeah, we're just about to hit the VWAP band. We're almost at the 261. And also, like this movement we have here, it's up to the VWAP band. I was mentioning earlier, the distance that we had at the bottom could literally go all of the distance to get to this side, to get to that band, to get to that 261, to get to this high, and still come all the way back down to the VWAP. So that's an interesting analysis there. The red zone, though, is something that we love to attack from above. And I mean, the 261 to 188 is an excuse to try and get this to work like that. The most important thing right now is the fact that it's a shitty triangle.
And it kind of really stomps out any excitement anyone could really have with this area. Like, it's nothing to be excited about. I do think that it's going to fall to the red zone at some point here, but will it make a spike and grab everyone's stops first? Probably. I'd like to think a lot of people are just holding short, waiting for the market to go down. They have a stop on the top of the range. It's not in profit. And that's a bad position to be in, I think. A lot of people won't be buying for more profit higher, and the institutions will get a lot of people by just doing that. And I can see that. A lot of people feel really weird about buying this high. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying, ironically, it'll probably work because nobody will do it. You see what I mean? Probably going up like that. Like, these people are literally getting railed now. Like, most of the people shorted it, and I'm like, man, that's killing me. So it's like mind games. I can see the mind games, but they're not that complicated though. It's not very complicated, I don't think. You can see how most people would suffer with this move. Unfortunately. And where are they all putting their stops? On top of the 261 I was interested in? You know, it's like, isn't that suspicious that everybody's gonna lose their short position to some mysterious entity at the actual good price? I'm like, that's interesting. Why is that white? It should be green. No remorse for anybody. And I could see that. Because nobody would choose for this move to happen, I don't think. Many people would choose for it to go down. It would be obvious. Doesn't mean it's not going to come down over all of this eventually, but just without these people. Like, you can see how many people were piled in there. Like, going up a little bit means all the short sellers put their trades up for sale, and that's when I'm interested in grabbing it. It's like, oh, will we make a spike? Like I said earlier, it's probably make a spike, and it's like, well, how? You know, will we drive up into their stops and spike them all out? Like, this is a slow, subtle kind of stop out. Oh, and I'm like, oh, triangles? How many times do we like to test the top and then run? Like we did over here. We literally came down, made a red candle and everything. Woohoo. And then we came to test the triangle and ran. But like, that's what we do though. When we go look at the triangles from over here, not necessarily that one, but these ones, we retested and ran. And I'll just quickly explain this. I'm getting good at it now because I explain this all the time, and it's with this specific area. That was a triangle, right? It tested the top and ran, right? That was a triangle. It tested the top and ran, right? That was a triangle. It tested the top and ran, right? This was a triangle, and it tested the top, and it ran. The biggest triangle had the worst playout, the smallest one the best. That's a strange environment. And then we broke the trend and it immediately changed the way that it does things. That small spike out of the top didn't mean continuation anymore. That small spike out of the top of this triangle didn't mean continuation. In fact, we were getting involved with small spike out of the top, big spike out of the bottom. You know, a lot of grinding on the red zone, a lot of sniping of the green. And here we are, on cue. As I mentioned, what about spiking the triangle? Here we go. You can see there's two VWAPs in there. They've been used, like these two purple bands, they're kind of hard to see, but you can see them coming through there. They're related to these guys down here. This is where most of the chop and the crap was. And now we're related to these guys up here. It's so similar to how it should work. I mean, when you explain how a VWAP should work, that's what it should do though. Also, it's disturbing how much of a blue line we've created here. Why? Because on Monday, when we did a very similar movement, I'll show you this on a different chart actually. This is Monday. We managed to go here, down, 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 launch. And then we started to chop. And we went up with another third drive. Let's just take all of that. That's a concept, an idea that we did that. Just a little follow along with that. And then we look at what we've done today, right? It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty freaking similar. Let's take a look here. So, you know, we had the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it was kind of angled down. This one wasn't angled down, but it still had 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You know, we still came from this movement, just like we did in the other one. We launched up and paused to make 3 consecutive highs. I'm like, really? Like that? Do we see how this right here? Not really, but kind of, you know. I cut it a break. Is it trying to do this, but it sucks? Remember yesterday when I was explaining that? The kind of idea that it's trying to get away with the same sort of construction of the high, except it's just not as good. Does it have the potential to be like this? Sure, it really does. Like, what else is going to be similar? You know, brings the question, right? Like, is it not true that the largest part of the movement was made yet again? And I'm like, oh yeah, it is true. We use this range too. Like I said, this isn't really an old chart, but like, look at how perfectly that range was being used at the VWAPs. And then like the whole chopping of the red zone and smashing it from above here too, that's a characteristic we often see. And even in this old range below, there's something to take home from it too. Like the distance that we managed to make on the bottom was the same distance that we managed to make on the top. So we have that happening on this range, then the range being used properly. Now the range grinding the red zone. How do we like to use ranges, if not all of those different ways? Actually, this is another one we didn't look at. Don't tell me it just went from the green zone to red zone of a range that's that clear. Should have looked at that chart too. That's a really good chart. It shows that, you know, you don't really want to give positions up until we get to the other side of the range. And if there's more of the range to go, then, you know, in theory, we could get there. Now, the problem with this specific range is it's a range of equal portions. And why would I say that? Well, because the highs were there, like, I'll explain the story behind this. This was its own range originally, you know? We like to consolidate in this spot at some point when we were using that range, you know? That's what that shows me, right? Now that range is actually the same size as this range of equal portions, you know? Like if I was to show literally, like is it from edge to edge the same size? You know? Yeah. And the middle is basically equal portion. The middle, you could say, like, if I drag this in here, and I'm like, does it fit? Can you do that in there without obstructing what we did at the high? You know, without obstructing what we did on the low? You know, you could fit that in there, right? And there's 3 equal portions to this range. Now, originally, of course, this was the first one to happen. Then this one happened after, and now we're stuck in the middle of both of those ranges, as though it is confined within one of these ranges, or within one of these ranges, except it's using this as the green zone and this is the red zone, and it's making the distance it would usually like to make here, that it would usually like to make here, in between. I don't know how to explain that any better than that, though, honestly. I can't, it's complicated in a weird way, and when you understand it, it's simple, but maybe I just suck at explaining it. I do think that it's a range of equal portions. Well, another thing is in terms of price action that I would look into, or well, consider is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I look at that,
Mhm.
I'm like, you know, just putting a fib on there, like this low becomes the 61. Like when we do that. And I'm like, this is just a random move. I just drew that move in there, but it's like, you know, the way it kind of should be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, even if we change this around a little bit, it doesn't really affect the 61. So
Yeah. We're
even if
going
we're
up for
here,
the fifth wave
fifth,
here,
that's what I
right
mean.
here.
So when like
Yeah.
why I mentioned that is I'm like, oh shit, because everyone could realize now that we're on the 5th wave and it's a 3 drives pattern, like an ending diagonal, like this, it could make that 61. And I'm like, why would I like that? Well, what else is there? You know, the VWAP. I'm like coming back to the
Mhm.
VWAP and making it into the 61, hitting all these B points down here. I'm like, it's tough to stand in the way of that. You know what I mean? Because at any time it could just suddenly decide it wants to do that. Like this right here, if you were to show me this pattern in like 2 months and ask me what it was, I'd say it was an ending diagonal because it has a 5-wave move. Like it's obviously a 5-wave move, but it has a 3 drives pattern at the end as the 5th wave. And, it only really came down to here. And really, when you get a 3 drives pattern, you must make sure that it's safe by that point in this market environment. And that could change in the future. Like, it could be picked on so much that, it never works like a head and shoulders. Maybe it never comes down, for months and months and months. So we have to be prepared for that. We can't just mindlessly think it's going to work the way we understand it. But our understanding of it should change as it changes.
I mean, this thing's coming off like 261 too up here
And
with the high.
oh yeah, the ones on the other chart there.
Come up.
I don't
This
even
is
have those
the
on this
down to
chart.
188.
This other 261 has been stomped on countless times as well. All of those places that it usually goes to just insinuate a big attack on the red zone at some point.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a retracement back to that 188 200.
Yep.
Oh, your arrows are there.
Right. Yep. It does look like it would be.
But that was the goal, anyways. Go from 261 down to 188 200. So.
Yep. The third drive was the key as well to the trend break, and the red zone was smashed from above. Everything that we did beyond the last consolidation is in jeopardy of being wiped out, and it could look like a 61. If it gets to the B point, it will be the 61. Because it reversed at the 261, it'll be very close to the B point. That's where the 61 actually is, on top of all of the B points. So just like Monday, and I'm gonna show was this chart Monday happened again basically, except it was a smaller version, and the 3 drives pattern was certainly relevant given everything that happened after that. What did we do after the rising or after the 3 drives? We took all of that back. What was the overall retracement of the entire movement? Are we going to do the same thing? What was the actual retracement? Did we make it down to the 61? Was it that 61 that caused this run? Is the 61 now the VWAP? The VWAP is of interest as well, but I like the idea of slipping through the 61 as well. The 127 and 141 in the green zone down below is something of interest.
Oh, yeah. 127, 141. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a green zone down there, too. It's got a sort of reverse probably around that particular area. Makes sense. Added confluence.
So, of this entire movement, right? If we manage to come down to the 127, 141, it will be this big one here that's related to that one there. And like obviously this little guy right here is related to this one here. And the irony is like if this works good enough to get us back to here, the red zone that it's related to is here at the other 141, 127. Like some of these trends, I can turn them down just because I realize a lot of people could look at the wrong thing when I'm looking at this chart. I'm like, those don't matter. I'm not looking at that. Not looking at these. I overlooked them. Like you're looking through a bush almost in a way. But I look at the thing I'm focusing on, and I'm focusing on the red arrows right now and the green zones, the things that the arrows are pointing to, the fibs. My eyes aren't looking at the trends right now. They're looking at the fibs and the zones and what they could mean. That